This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 58. Welcome to the 58th episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Happy New Year! Oh my goodness, I can't believe it's been a year. I know I talked about this in my year in review episode, but I just want to wish you all a very happy new year as this episode is airing on January the 1st, 2016. And I wish you all the best for a very happy and fertile and healthy new year. And so thank you for joining me today. In case you don't know, in case this is your first time listening, I'm Lisa from FertilityFriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. If you've been enjoying the show, I would love it if you take a moment and leave a review and a rating on iTunes. It would help the show to move up in rankings so that more people can find it. And of course, I'd like to say a special thank you to all the listeners who have left reviews already. I do read all of the reviews, and I, of course, appreciate you taking the time to let me know how I'm doing. If you enjoyed today's episode, I would love it if you would stop by the show notes page and leave a comment. You'll find all the podcast episodes at fertilityfriday.com/podcast. You can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/fertilityfridays with an S and on Twitter at fertilefriday. And if you'd like to learn more about the fertility awareness method, you can join the Fertility Friday community on Facebook. So just go to fertilityfriday.com/community and you'll be redirected to the Fertility Friday Fertility Awareness Facebook group. And in today's show, I'm very excited to welcome my guest, Dr. Aumatma Shah. Dr. Aumatma is a naturopathic doctor with a Master of Science in Nutrition who specializes in fertility and women's health. She recently finished her Get Fertile, Stay Fertile telesummit, where she interviewed 25 of the world's top integrative fertility experts. Dr. Aumatma has also developed a 4-month fertility program that has 3 phases, which we'll talk about today: detoxification, rebalancing hormones, mind-body energy work. And in today's show, we'll be talking about detoxification and the role it can play for women who are trying to conceive, some of the ways that we can all boost and preserve our fertility, as well as some of the challenges that are unique to women who are trying to conceive after age 40. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Dr. Aumatma.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, thanks so much for being here. So I did give you a bit of an introduction, but I would love for you to tell the listeners a bit more about your background and how you ended up focusing on fertility work specifically.
Okay, great. That's a great question. I've been in practice for about 10 years now, and every now and then throughout my practice, I've asked my higher guide spirits what I should be focusing on and how I can serve more people, really. And it was about 3-4 years ago that the message started coming in really strongly that I should focus on fertility. Simultaneously, I had lots of patients that were coming in asking me about freezing their eggs. They said, "Oh, my doctor told me I should. I'm 26 years old. Maybe I should freeze my eggs." And as they were asking me these questions, and I really didn't know that much about it at the time, and I said, "Well, I'm not sure. Let me look into it." And what came out is just out of the research that I was doing, just started thinking about, well, if egg freezing has I believe it's like a 1.3% success rate, the number of people that use those eggs and out of those people who's actually successful, it comes down to about 1.3%. My thought was, well, surely natural medicine can do better than that. What can natural medicine offer for preserving fertility? So I started on that path and then really quickly got into helping couples with their fertility while they were actively trying to conceive. So it's been kind of a journey that just opened itself up as I went. And I was in a relationship that I was considering leaving and was really kind of worried that I wasn't going to be able to have a child if I left this person that I was with because, how long it takes to find someone and blah, blah, blah. So it was a pretty big consideration at the time, and as I was doing all of this research, I was just like, yeah, well, it makes more sense for me to take my chances on my eggs than to be with the wrong person and have kids with the wrong person. Mm-hmm. So I kind of went through all of this as it was happening all at once. And I think about 2 months after I said, yes, serious, okay, I'll do this, I got hired at an acupuncture clinic where the head doctor was a fertility specialist and started sending me all of her tough cases. And as they got pregnant, I really kind of was able to gain the confidence as well as really kind of create the structure for the program that's now become the 4-month program.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's one of the things you said really struck, well, a lot of the things you said really struck me, but one of the things that you said about the egg freezing success rate being 1.3%, that's a lot less than anyone would ever have expected it would be. Because I know I've had a number of guests on the show. We've talked about aging and fertility and some of the things that women should just be thinking about, right? Especially with the realities of things these days, with many women conceiving at advanced ages. So many women having their first child, well into their 30s or even closer to their 40s. So that's really interesting that that's kind of how you entered into this space. Yeah, I'm still on that 1.3%.
I know it sounds like a ridiculously small number, but the truth is that egg freezing is more of a blanket. It's like it gives you some sort of security that perhaps if you end up waiting so much later in life, then you will have this backup. Unfortunately, most women that freeze their eggs don't actually go back and need them. Mm. So that's the big, part of the low percentage. But it's true that egg freezing is still at the beginning stages of its science. So surely that number is going to improve over time. Mm-hmm. But I think that where science is now, it's probably not as miraculously preserving your fertility as doctors would like to make it seem. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important to realize, it's not the worst idea ever. If you think that you want to freeze your eggs so that you can possibly try to get pregnant with them later, great, go for it. If you have $20,000 to go do that, great. It sounds like a perfect idea. But I think what's important to remember or know is that it's not the magic bullet. So even after you freeze your eggs, there should be care in how you preserve your fertility. And I think that's where really I like to focus my energy. It's cool, if you want to freeze your eggs, awesome, go do that. But don't use that as a way to then spend the next 10 years of your life partying and depleting your adrenals and depleting your egg quality until you want to get pregnant and then expect it to work. So I think it really needs a both-and approach rather than, I froze my egg, so now I'm good and I can go do whatever I want. It doesn't quite work like that. So I think it's important to bring balance to that thought process. And just, I think the statistics really help make it apparent. Even if you do this, you still need to do other things because there's a real possibility that route may not work.
Okay. Well, I think that's a great segue into one of the areas that you address in your program, which is preserving fertility, especially in those ages before we're ready. So whether, I know you mentioned kind of that age range of age 25 to 35, where maybe as a woman, you're not really ready to have kids just yet, but you know that you want to in the future. So what are some of the practical ways that we can all work towards preserving our fertility so that when we want to get pregnant, we have an easier time doing so?
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great question, and it would probably take me 2 hours of a talk to give you everything. But I think there are a few things that almost everyone can use across the board. One is making sure you get enough sleep. The amount of sleep that you get is going to be directly related to your egg quality in the future. or even now. So I think one of the main things I find is that women sacrifice their sleep often for their careers, which then ends up leaving them in a more depleted state. Melatonin also in the body is one of the biggest antioxidants. There's actually lots of research that suggests melatonin is in relatively high doses, like 20 milligrams per night, is going to be increasing in quality. So I'm not saying you should take melatonin for the next 10 years. I'm actually saying that if you support your body's natural melatonin, which happens when you sleep at night, then you will help to preserve your eggs. So that's one easy thing that everyone can do.
Can I throw in a quick interjection? Sorry. Just something on sleep that is so interesting, because I just recently did an interview with a woman named Joy DeFelice. And it was all about how if a woman sleeps in total darkness, so if she gets rid of all of those artificial lights in her sleeping environment, how that can have such a major impact on her hormone production and melatonin production. So along with the sleep, I just definitely wanted to throw that in there because you would, when you think about fertility, I think sleep is the very last thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's a really great thing that you just said is like, yes, absolutely important to sleep in total darkness. The second thing that I would say is watching the stress levels. And I would add to that, like really finding ways to balance stress so that it doesn't affect the body as much as it would if you didn't have a balance on it. There are lots of herbs that you could take for stress rebalance, but I think it goes into being mindful of how stressed out you really are. And often women will come in and say, oh, I'm not that stressed. And they're working like 60 to 80-hour work weeks. They're not sleeping very well, and they have all the symptoms of stress, but they don't actually know how to calibrate themselves to realize that their body is actually stressed. So I think that awareness of making sure that there's some awareness around stress and what women are doing to deal with it and manage it. There's never going to be a time where you just like are able to go away from all the stressors. There's always going to be stress. But it's all about how we can manage it and deal better with it. There's a general diet that I've been finding to be really, really beneficial for a lot of people that I work with. And it's not really so much of what you eat, it's more of what you eat when you eat it. So it's called the Adrenal Reset Diet by Dr. Alan Christensen. You can read the book if you like, but the general idea is protein in the morning, protein for lunch, and then complex carbohydrates for dinner. And that helps to reset your adrenals so that A, you can sleep better, B, you have more energy, but overall you're supporting your adrenals over time rather than depleting them. So I really love that diet, as well as just a gentle way to rebalance the body, especially if you're planning on doing something for 10 years.
Okay, and a question about the diet. So obviously focusing on having protein first thing in the morning and protein at lunch, is that partly due to how the effect of having carbohydrates in the morning, what that does to your insulin levels and the kind of stress that puts on your body?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think what his research is suggesting is that eating the carbs at night actually helps to release some of the hormones that you need for nighttime, which help to improve your sleep quality, which then, supports the end goal, which is preserving the fertility. So,
well, isn't that interesting? If anyone has like sugar cravings, it's more likely to happen at night, right?
Yeah, and like one of my beliefs is that cravings almost always are indicators of what your body needs. So sugar cravings aren't always just about the sugar. They're possibly more about the carbs than the sugar. And I would be very curious to have people try this diet and see if their cravings go away, because it's going to help bring the body back into balance from the perspective of, like, the sugar cravings are just a symptom or a sign of, like, your body really needs something. And the healthy state will generally be balanced enough that you don't have cravings of that sort. So I generally, like, when I have patients that say, oh, I have cravings for this, it's usually like an indicator of what's the deeper thing that their body is craving. And once they get that deeper thing, then their cravings go away.
Okay. And so when it comes to preserving fertility, then some of the basic things that we should all be doing are getting enough sleep, making sure to try to reduce the stress in our lives, and try to, I guess, maintain a balanced diet that would help. Obviously, that helps overall, because if we're putting a ton of processed foods into our body and a ton of pesticides and artificial hormones, that would cause undue stress on our bodies as well. So any other things that I guess we should all kind of be thinking of and mindful of if we're wanting to preserve our fertility?
Yes. So I know we're going to talk about birth control, but hormonal birth control in general will tend to decrease fertility over time. So really reconsidering whether you want to be on hormonal birth control is a good idea, and then we can get into that later. And then I would say, actually jumping back to food for a second, the other main thing that I find when I work with couples that are dealing with infertility is that they have tons and tons of food sensitivities. So food sensitivities are really interesting because they create this inflammation, which then will make it harder for you to get pregnant. So the easiest would probably be to prevent the food sensitivities. And the general recommendation that you could use to prevent food sensitivities is to create a rotation of the diet. So the more you rotate your diet, the less likely your body will be to create an immune reaction to whatever that food is. So that, I think, is a really easy thing that people can do right away on their own that will kind of help keep the inflammation to a minimum, that then will help support fertility in the long run. Besides these things, I feel like a lot of the recommendations I would agree with, which are pretty general, like limit the amount of alcohol, no smoking, things of that sort, lifestyle things, which definitely will support fertility, exercise, those kinds of things, maintain a normal body weight. And I guess the last piece that I would say is often preserving fertility, if you want to do it actively, needs maybe a little bit of a jump start. So really looking at having a practitioner who can look through your lab tests or even do lab tests and figure out if there is a underlying hormonal issue, which is going to be later a problem. And the main hormones are obviously the adrenals, but also the thyroid and then the female hormones. So having a practitioner, a doctor, review those lab results and come up with a plan to help balance your hormones now rather than 5 years from now. Will really kind of support your fertility in the long run. Not only that, it'll have you feeling better now rather than waiting till it's a big serious issue.
Yeah, I think that that's so important Because of course with podcast, we're always talking kind of in general terms. These things could be helpful. These are things to look for. These are things to watch. But each person is different. And, as a doctor, as a naturopathic doctor, I'm sure you see it all the time. You have patients probably who show similar symptoms and have completely different reasons, or show completely different symptoms and have the same reason. So finding out what is happening with you, each person could have different sensitivities to different foods, and having the only way to know really is to test yourself, whether it's a lab test or whether it's when you do one of those elimination diets or something like that. So it's all well and good to get the general information, but if you're really looking at what's happening with you, you have to kind of work with someone, like you said, to get those results specific to your situation.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that actually, depending on how old the woman is, but let's say she's 30 and wants to wait another 5 years, or she's 32 and wants to wait 5 years, it's really helpful to take the pressure off, because there's some markers, there's some tests that we can do to really give you a sense of, like, oh, okay, like, yes, my fertility isn't as great as I want it to be, and I can do something about it, or it's looking pretty good, and maybe I don't need to stress myself out about, like, marrying the first guy I see because I want to have a child. So I think it can really help with that, like, peace of mind to know. And most women, I've noticed, have really low-grade symptoms that they'll never talk about, or they don't even think are an issue, that as time progresses will become more and more of an issue. So by the time they come see me for fertility at 40, they're really, like, in a state that's going to take a while to come back from, rather than had they come in at 35, it would just have been way easier to catch it in the beginning, to do something about it, and to have them feel good for the next 5 years before they're ready to have a baby.
Well, and on the podcast, one of the main topics is, of course, the fertility awareness method. And not always, the fertility awareness method is a great form of natural birth control. And also it's very helpful when you're trying to get pregnant to identify when you're fertile. But beyond that, we talk about so much how it really can be a marker and indicator of your health. And so, I would throw that in there, charting your cycles, because unless you chart your cycles, there's certain things you wouldn't know, certain indicators of suboptimal fertility that you just wouldn't have. So if you chart your cycles and you notice that your cervical mucus quality isn't good, even if you're not trying to get pregnant now, if you see that, then that's something that could trigger you to think, oh, you know what? I think that my fertility is suboptimal. So what can I do to improve that? Or if your menstrual cycle length isn't within the normal range, or if your post-ovulatory phase is too short. These are things that, unless you're charting your cycles, you probably wouldn't know about until you're ready to get pregnant, and that's when you find out, just like you said.
That's super awesome. I love that, as, like, you're not only preserving your fertility for later, you're preventing pregnancy now, but it's also, like, a great way to figure out what your hormones are doing and do something about it now rather than wait till later. Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I get a lot of questions from women who are coming off hormonal birth control and who are wondering about this whole detox thing. So, should I be doing a detox before I try to get pregnant? Or, how can I get rid of those hormones in my body, or whatever the case? So I'd love for you to talk a bit about the detoxification part of your program and what your recommendations are for women who are planning to get pregnant soon.
Yeah. So yes, definitely do a detox before trying to start conceiving. Their babies are born these days with about 287 chemicals floating through the bloodstream at birth. So that, to me, is a really big indicator that, in general, a majority of women are have lots of toxins and are going to be needing some sort of detox before they get pregnant. And I think it would be great to just help children come into a little bit of a healthier state so that their immune system has to deal with less stuff. So I think absolutely there's definitely reason for detox. But as far specifically as the hormones go, I think that different women have different experiences, but coming off the pill will take somewhere between 6 months to 2 years to rebalance from. So, and a lot of women don't realize this. They say, oh, I just got off of birth control. Shouldn't I get pregnant? Well, let's actually talk about what's happening. It might take months to reset your hormonal cycle, for one. But two, there's also only a 20% chance at any given cycle that you could actually get pregnant. So coming off the pill isn't going to get you pregnant that quickly. So giving that time and space and realizing that they might actually want to stop their hormonal birth control about 2 years before they actually want to start trying to have a baby. That would give really enough time for the body to process through all the hormones. However, if women don't have that much time, then a detox is a really great way to help rebalance the body. So my general recommendations for a detox, generally speaking, my clients go on a pretty intense detox that involves kind of doing first unprocessed foods and things like that, moving into a raw food diet for about 3 days before doing a juice fast for 5 days. And the juice fast really, at least the way that I've been trained, is a really good reset for the entire body and allows, and not introducing new foods actually gives your body a break and allows it to get rid of things that are floating around. Generally speaking, if a woman has been on hormonal birth control prior to doing the detox, there's herbs and things that I add in as part of the juice fast that help to decrease the kind of the hormonal toxic load in the body so that the detox can also help support the detox of these hormones.
Okay. I have a number of questions that come to mind. And one of them is, you kind of addressed it already. You talked about how if a woman's on the birth control pill, I mean, of course, there's different factors depending on how long she's been on it and, how her body handles it. Because we all know of that, person that goes off the pill and gets pregnant right away. But a lot of women have that kind of idea, okay, so I go off the pill, I do detox, and then I'm totally fine. So maybe you could talk about that, because wherever we're at in our lives, it took us years to get here. So if you were on the pill for 10 years, or if you've been, binge drinking every weekend for the last 15 years, a 5-day detox isn't going to just fix everything magically. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how that works and what the role of detoxification is, but also the limitations in a short-term detox.
Yeah. So detox is definitely not a magic bullet. And I think you're right. I often forget that there are even practitioners out there that promote a detox as the magic bullet. Like, hey, once you detox, you're all good. You can go get pregnant. It's usually not that simple. And the reason that it's not that simple is that even if you've detoxified, you still need to make lifestyle changes. So it's not like do the detox, then go back to the crap that you were eating before or the lifestyle that you were living before. But really using that detox as a reset to what's going to support your body in the long run. And, my program is 4 months. We don't detox for 4 months. So part of what needs to happen after is the detox really helps to clear the pathways, to create a sense of like, okay, we've got now a baseline of what your body's needs are, and now we can go and rebalance them. So even after a detox, a woman's hormones may still be off, or her FSH might still be ridiculously high, or her estrogen might be high and her progesterone too low. Whatever it is, there's lots of different hormonal possibilities that could be happening. And the rebalance phase is really about how do we help to bring your body's hormones back into homeostasis so that they all work with each other. The thyroid is a really big, important one. Lots of women have these like low-level hypothyroid conditions that are not often detected by quote-unquote normal lab tests. So there's so many other factors beyond just a basic detox. And I think the thing with fertility is that there are often not that many signs. So it's not infrequent that I sit down with a woman and she's been infertile for 5 years, unable to conceive for 5 years, and yet she's sitting in front of me saying, no, I don't have that. No, I don't have that. No, I don't have that. And I'll go through a list of like 300 different symptoms, and she doesn't have a single one of these symptoms except that she can't get pregnant. So obviously something else is going on in the body, but often it's really easy to get into the trap of, well, I did a detox and I feel super healthy, so I should be able to have a baby, and then it doesn't work. But there's this like tricky chance of, well, maybe the next time will be different, right? I'll just try again one more month. And then before people know it, it's like 2, 3, 4 years down the line. And the same thing goes with IVF. I think lots of women, lots of couples get into this, oh, well, we're just going to try one cycle of IVF. Okay, and then that doesn't work. Well, maybe we'll try one more, and maybe that one will be successful. So there's this sense of like, well, I'll just keep trying until I'm totally like tapped out and tired and exhausted. So I went a little bit off, but I think just to bring it back, I think that often the misunderstanding about our bodies is that if we feel healthy, then we are. And generally speaking, that might be true, but it really needs some time and attention and analysis to figure out, like, okay, if you've tried for 6 months to a year and you're not conceiving, maybe it's time to seek help and support, not from the perspective of something is wrong with you, but really like from the perspective of what else could you do to help bring your body back into balance so that the fertility happens.
Well, I think that's a great point. And I would throw in there that it's safe to say that many of us are disconnected from our bodies to one extent or another. And so you could be feeling fine, but if, just as an example, so let's say you have a food sensitivity that kind of gives you maybe a little bit of stomach discomfort, but it's not enough to like be doubled over in pain or anything. But you never really notice it because you feel like that every day. Then you meet a naturopathic doctor who suggests you go on an elimination diet, and then you eliminate all these foods, and then a month later you introduce it back, and all of a sudden you notice a stomach pain that you know that feels familiar, but you didn't notice it before. So I guess where I'm going with this is it's possible to feel fine, but if you've kind of had a crappy situation for a number of years, your fine might be someone else's kind of not good. And
right.
Until you know what great feels like, you might not even notice that you're not feeling as good as you could. So I would just throw that out there as a concept, because working in the area of fertility awareness, there's women who don't even notice that they have ovulation pain until they start charting. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, that's what that is. But you've had it every, for years, and so I'm just throwing it out there that you can feel fine, but to some extent we're all disconnected from our bodies. Unless you're really paying attention, you wouldn't necessarily know that there's something wrong. You might think that heartburn you get every day is just normal.
Yeah, it's so true. And it happens very frequently. You're totally right. It's really easy. It's really like our brain turns off the signal of not feeling well because it would be exhausting to think about every time I eat tomatoes, my stomach hurts. Yeah. Like your brain is just going to turn that signal off because, okay, I've given you that signal for a little while now. You're not paying attention to it. It's better for me to turn it off and not pay attention rather than keep having that signal repeat in the brain.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that it's like our body's way to almost like give ourselves a break or like have us feel functional even if we're not super super healthy. It's not optimal state of health. It's something that we can get by with.
Yeah, it's the same analogy of like you walk into a house and they've just baked fresh bread and you smell it, but then 10 minutes later you don't smell it anymore, or there's like a fan going on in the background and you hear it, but then you don't hear it. So your body only pays attention to the things that are, I guess, the loudest.
Yeah.
One other question I had about detoxification, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about because I think we have this idea of detoxification as being a thing that you do like once or in a while or something, but our bodies are detoxifying all the time. And so that's kind of what our bodies do. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how we can all kind of support our bodies' detoxification that's happening anyways on a daily basis, because one of the things that I think is really important that you mentioned when we talked about hormonal birth control is that part of it is time. And so part of it, as you mentioned, it could take anywhere from 6 months to 2 years for your body to not necessarily getting the hormones out, but restoring the natural flow and function of your endocrine system. Because the pill is a huge insult to your endocrine system. It basically stops your natural healthy function of your endocrine system. Mm-hmm. So maybe you could talk a little bit about, the everyday woman, because one of the other things is, say you have a client and they're in the middle of some detox and then they get pregnant, right? So maybe that's a bunch of different things, but maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. So I'll talk about the last question first because it's such an interesting one. My clients do not get pregnant while they're detoxing because I tell them to basically stop trying for a period of time before they start trying again. So they're taking a total break from sex, basically, during the early phases of the program. So it's actually really unsafe to get pregnant while detoxing. Your body has flushed out all of these toxins. They're floating in the bloodstream instead of the fat cells where they're normally stored. And getting pregnant just introduces that embryo to this group of toxins. So it's absolutely contraindicated. Do not try not to get pregnant while you're detoxing. That's super important. But going back to this, what you started with, like the everyday woman, there's a few things that I think are really important to think about as living a detoxified lifestyle. And I think those things are, I could have a really long list of them, but covering the major areas where toxins come in. So really like looking for avoidance over all else. So our toxins come from, a lot of it is our environment. So the water we drink, making sure that we have a really great filter on our water system so that we can not introduce heavy metals, low degrees of medication byproducts for all kinds of things that are in our water. Get them out. So that's really important. Chloride and fluoride that are in our water are actually the biggest antagonist to the thyroid, which is iodine-based. So I don't know how many people remember this, but chloride, fluoride, and iodine are all on the same line of the periodic table, so they all can interchange themselves. So when you have fluoride in the body or you have lots of chloride, it's going to kick out the iodine molecule and replace it with a chloride or fluoride molecule. And that pretty much makes the thyroid hormone non-functional, even though it looks like thyroid hormone. So the water, I think, is really important. I don't know if there's like a way to put links on, but I'd be happy to like share a couple of links of good filters. I've kind of done a fair amount of research on water because I'm really passionate about it. So that's step one. Number two would be our air quality. So it's actually been proven that the air quality inside of our houses is worse than outside. So it's important to detoxify the inside of our house in terms of the air quality. Getting a really good air filter is a basic thing that you can do. And then beyond the air and water, I think it's like getting away from EMFs and not sleeping in rooms where EMFs are really high. It would be a really great idea. Let's see what else. The other common things, like getting away from BPA, plastic bottles, aluminum cans, things like that introduce xenoestrogens into our body. So basically any source of xenoestrogen or fake estrogen will act like an estrogen in our body and have the same effects as estrogen in our body, but it's not actually being produced by our body. So those are really pretty dangerous.
And can I just interject for a second there? I would love for you to expand on some of the places that we get xenoestrogens every day, especially as women, and just don't know that it could be affecting our hormones, like lotion and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think so. That's a great one. Body care products. They won't call it xenoestrogens. They're calling it like propyl ethanol something or other. But a lot of body care products in general are toxic. So regardless of whether they're putting BPA like xenoestrogens in there or something else, they're pretty toxic to our body. So trying to use really clean body care products, people always ask me like, well, what do you use? I use avocado oil or almond oil. Like, that's what goes on my body. And what do I wash with? Well, I'm actually trying to work on a list of toxin-free body care products because they are few and far between. Even at a health food store, you can go in and find out like the majority of shampoos and conditioners have toxins in them. So I think it's really important to be diligent and read every label. I may not even know every single toxin that's out there. What I do know is that what I'm looking for when I read labels is, does that sound like a botanical thing or a natural thing, or does it sound like a chemical? And usually you can tell from if it ends in an OL, it's an alcohol derivative of some sort. If it has numbers in it, it's definitely a chemical. Like, there's some basic things that you'll start picking up if you keep reading the labels and you see the patterns.
And an ingredient like fragrance or something. They say that when you see fragrance, it has like 100 chemicals in it or something like that.
Wow.
I'm with you in the sense that on my skin, I use coconut oil and shea butter, and that's pretty much it. Like for face, body
Yeah.
lotion, so anyways, I just wanted to throw that out there to, if you can get by on
Yeah.
something like that where it's a one ingredient item, then that's helpful.
Yeah, and that's kind of the ideal. Let's see what else. Oh, the BPA. So the other places where xenoestrogens come in, plastic water bottles, obviously, but also, like I said, the aluminum cans are often lined with plastic. So you get canned beans, and they poured hot beans into the cans before packaging them, and guess what? They melted all that plastic right into your food. So that's a pretty toxic source of it. Aluminum cans, on the other hand, if they're not lined with plastic, are just as bad because aluminum is a toxin that's been known to cause brain damage, Alzheimer's, all kinds of things. So either way, it's not a good idea. Make your own beans from scratch. It's really not that hard. So that's what I want. Receipt. So we go to a store, we pick up something, they give us a receipt. That receipt, especially the print on it, it has xenoestrogen molecules, which your body absorbs through the skin. So the number of receipts that we collect over a week or a year, all of them are going to be introducing a level of estrogens in our body that we don't really need. So when I go into a store, I really think about, like, do I really need that receipt, or is it better for me to not take it? And usually it's not take it unless it's a business expense. Mm-hmm. So those end up saving a fair amount of estrogen being introduced into the body. Where else? Our water actually has xenoestrogens in it. So we already talked about water for other things, but also for the estrogen.
Yeah, because all the women out there that are taking the birth control pill, they pee, and then when they filter the water, all those hormones can't. They don't take. Hormones are hard to get out of water because they're so small.
Right.
So
right.
we're all drinking estrogen. Isn't that crazy? So crazy.
Yeah, we're all drinking estrogen and Xanax. And Paxil, like,
that's just so
anti-anxiety and antidepressive medications, all in our water supply. It's pretty insane.
Yeah, and men's sperm counts, they keep saying keep going down, and it's like, maybe it's because we're all drinking estrogen water. I don't know. It's just an idea.
Yeah. Well, so what else? I feel like there's probably other sources, but I'm missing some. So if you have any to throw in there, that would be great.
Well, one of the things I always kind of talk about, because I think learning all this information, it's a lot of information, and basically it's everywhere. So I think that it can be really overwhelming to learn that, xenoestrogens, we're getting them from our water, we're getting them from our beauty supplies, even from the food. So if you're eating regular conventional meat, beef, chicken, they give the chicken and beef hormones and antibiotics and things like that. So you're actually getting hormones from your meat, and that can actually be contributing to the disruption of your hormonal system. So I think it can be really overwhelming. And I think what you can take from it is just to be aware, first of all, of these different factors that are disrupting your endocrine system, and then maybe focusing on one thing that you can do. So maybe you could look into a type of lotion that doesn't smell like strawberries. I always say that. It smells like strawberries. If it smells like strawberries, it's disrupting your endocrine system. So maybe you could just focus on one thing and then see how that goes, and then maybe move to the next thing, because it definitely can be overwhelming. And basically all we can do is reduce our exposure, because at the end of the day, we live in the world. If you live in a city like I do, I can eliminate as much xenoestrogen as I want, but then I still have to walk outside in the city that I live in and breathe in the air that's, the air that's polluted with gas and those things also disrupt it. So you're never going to get rid of all of it, but it's just to try to find a way to reduce it in your own life, and then just kind of start looking at ways that you can reduce the impact.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you.
Well, and let me just see here, because I know that we're getting towards the end. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was specific challenges facing women who are trying to conceive as they get to the advanced ages as far as fertility concerns. So late 30s, early 40s. What are some of the ways that women who are kind of getting up there in age as far as fertility is concerned can boost their fertility or try to preserve it?
Yeah. So in general, I would say that the first thing is don't freak out and stop trying to let your doctor tell you that you can't get pregnant. So I really believe in the mind-body connection, and I believe that if we reaffirm to women that, oh, because you're older, you're not going to get pregnant, creates a kind of, like, even if it's not true, it's really just blocking the mind starts saying, oh, I can't get pregnant. I can't get pregnant. I can't get pregnant. And guess what? You're not going to get pregnant. So that's, I think the mindset is the first thing. I think it's great to go to a doctor and get an analysis done and see where things are at. But really, like, making sure you're going to someone that's actually open to you conceiving if you want to do it naturally. That they're actually open to the idea that you can. I think that's the first step. The second, I would say, is in general, and I feel like every case is going to be very, very different, but in general, things that will support, to help support you getting pregnant will be antioxidants. So CoQ10, L-carnitine, what else? NAC, things like that are really super dose antioxidants, melatonin, will help support fertility in quote unquote older women. I hate calling it that. But women over 35.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, increasing the amount of antioxidants will be really supportive. And then really things, probably things that women have read all over the place, like maca, will help support fertility. I tend to believe that everyone is very specific. So I think that it's important to look at each woman, actually each couple, as their own unit and treat them individually. So a 38-year-old woman over here might need something very different from a 38-year-old woman over there. So I think that's really important to look at. And then there's one therapy that is actually across the board I use for preserving as well as getting pregnant fertility treatment. And it's called Mercier therapy. It's a hands-on, basically a gynovisceral manipulation. So we're going in through the abdomen or over the abdomen and adjusting the ovaries and uterus over a course of 6 to 10 weeks. And that is really going to support blood flow to the uterus and ovaries, which then leads to greater fertility. It also leads to more balance in hormones. It will decrease pelvic pain, cramps, like all of the hormonally related symptoms that women have either before they're trying to conceive or while they're trying to conceive. So I feel like that therapy is a really important piece of what I do as far as like helping women support in increasing their fertility.
And a note on Mercier therapy, I did interview Marie Whitman, and we talked a lot about Mercier therapy. And I've done 2 interviews now. I did an interview with Rosita Arvigo, which Arvigo therapy has a lot of similarities with Mercier therapy, and a second interview about Arvigo therapy. And it's actually like the direct manipulation of your pelvic organs. And as you said, it improves circulation, alignment. I just find it to be so fascinating, and it makes so much sense that if you really improve that alignment and increase the blood flow, that can have such a profound impact on your fertility. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
And I think it's fantastic that you have it as part of your fertility treatment and program.
Yeah, it's become kind of an essential piece because as soon as I trained in it, I started practicing, and the more I use it, the more I realize, like, oh, the side that they don't ovulate from is actually the side that's, like, super torqued, and they have really intense pain when I push on that ovary. So it's become really interesting to, like, analyze, like, hey, you have these symptoms, and that actually matches when I go in and feel your ovaries or feel out what's happening. It gives me a lot of, it's a really great indicator or a reaffirmation of what's happening in the body is actually correlating to your hormones, to how you feel. It's pretty amazing. And I don't know when you had your guests on, but the studies that they've done on Mercier therapy, it seems like 80% success rate with women of all ages. I believe that half of those women were over 35 that were successful with just doing Mercier therapy. 80% success rate. I think it's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, I think Marie quoted the same statistic, and it's so high that it almost makes me feel uncomfortable because it's like my intention, of course, is to provide women with this information, so you have a toolkit and you can at least know, and then you decide, I'm really interested in Mercier therapy, so I didn't know it existed before, and so now I'm going to look into it and see if it helps me. So there's never any guarantees, but that's so profound. And similarly, with our Vigo therapy, has a really high success rate. And part of the reason why I'm so fascinated by it and why I think it's so profound is because it's non-invasive. It doesn't involve taking any medication. It's not a supplement. It's direct therapy to physical therapy kind of. It's not a massage, but it's basically that would be the word that people would kind of to help them to understand what it is. It's not a massage, like it's not going to be like relaxing someone, rubbing your back, but it's that massage.
I call it an intense massage.
Yes, but it's that massage type therapy that is manipulating your organs, and that is what actually helps to get rid of the scar tissue and to align and to increase circulation and to improve fertility and to reduce menstrual pain. And although it's amazing, really.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, before I have a few final questions to wrap up today's show. And before I ask them, did you have anything you wanted to say to the listener to kind of wrap up everything we've talked about today? I know that you and I could talk for the next 4 hours. I know this already, but before I ask the final questions, did you have any kind of just to wrap up what we've been talking about today?
I think the main point that I want to bring across, because we've covered a lot of ground in a really short amount of time. So, the main thing I would say is continue learning, continue getting empowered, like use the fertility awareness method, use ways of reconnecting with your body so that and you're empowered to feel out what's going on in your body well before you have symptoms or well before you actually are trying to get conceived. So I think that's the first thing. If you're already trying to conceive, I think that seeking out a person that's actually going to help support your mindset and where you are and what your goals are is really important. I've been reading this book by Deepak Chopra on intention, and apparently there's this guy that's a Darwin's successor that says that it's the intention of the apple to drop to the ground that actually causes gravity. Like he's going back even before something happens, there's the intention for that thing to happen. And I think that is really important to remember, is that we are going to create what we want in our lives. And as you're seeking out practitioners that are going to support you, seek out someone that is going to either hold that intention for you or have an intention that's similar, that's going to support your end goal. And, I think this podcast is amazing. I feel like if you're listening to this, you're getting lots and lots of information. So just being able to take one or two things away from what we've talked about today and applying it into your life right now. Don't wait. Don't say, 2 weeks from now I'll start doing that. No, do it now. And those little tiny shifts are going to support your body and fertility in the long run.
Okay, I couldn't agree more with what you said. And I think that the piece about intention, I think that you're the people that you're working with when you're trying to conceive, they need to be, if you think about it, a team, and they need to be on your side. So absolutely, that if you're wanting to try a natural approach before you even think about going the assisted reproductive technologies route, and your practitioner is not on board, then I think that is such a powerful thing to try to get people on your team, because they're supposed to be helping you, and that intention piece is so powerful. So final questions of the day. I think that this might have been what you would have said, but I'm still going to ask this question. What would you say is the most important thing that a woman should know when she's trying to get pregnant?
That's a great question. I would say that the most important thing is that your body in general, sure, there's people with physical abnormalities that maybe is going to be really hard for them to conceive. But in general, the majority of the population, your body wants to reproduce. So it's not, it's like you shouldn't need to overpower your body in any way. Your body wants to reproduce. It's the natural impulse of being human, being an animal, really. And our goal should always be how do we get you back to your natural state? It's not how do we fix you, how do we get you to do a certain thing. It's my deepest core belief is that your body wants to reproduce. So if we get it as close as we can to its optimal state, your reproductive function will work. And that's really what I want people to walk away with, is to have that belief in themselves and their bodies that this is natural, normal, and what it wants to do.
Okay. What would you say is the biggest myth about fertility that you'd like to see corrected?
That's another good question. I think I would go with the age myth. I feel like it is a myth in our society to believe that fertility is going to be harder or impossible after any given age. I feel like if a woman is having a regular cycle, or if she's having a regular cycle, she should be able to get pregnant. And I know that's a pretty radical statement to say, and I think that it is really, I'm hoping to balance out the myth of, after 35, there's going to be all kinds of problems, you're not going to get pregnant naturally. I think that it's a myth. And I feel like, again, I go back to that belief in our bodies and the belief that there are women in other parts of the world. Christian Northrup talks about this in her Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom book. She says that there are women in other parts of the world that get pregnant at 60.
Did you say 60, like 60?
Yes,
Oh my
60.
God.
That is what I said, yes.
Oh my gosh.
And I don't think that we necessarily need to do that, but I feel like if that's the potential of the human body, then we're cutting ourselves short, like way short. So I think really just that like wanting to help women be empowered around, you can get pregnant at whatever age you are at, as long as you are able to bring your body into its optimal state of balance. And sure, I'll say that there is a cutoff. Like, I don't want, if you're
you can get pregnant at 90 if you want.
Right, yeah.
Not exactly what you're saying.
Within reason, I want to say that it's possible, and that way maybe we're cutting ourselves way short. And just like wanting to inspire that belief in our bodies, which are amazing, amazing systems, really, that are all working together to support our highest intention, which is to reproduce and continue our race.
Okay, and last question of the day. For a woman who's listening and is currently on the pill or another form of hormonal contraception, she doesn't want to get pregnant now, but she's thinking about pregnancy within the next couple of years. What advice, if any, would you give to her?
Well, I would say that if she's open to it, getting off of the hormonal birth control and shifting to a different type of birth control. Don't do this on your own. You definitely need a practitioner like Lisa, for example, who is going to support you to learning about your rhythms and your patterns, and then shift to a non-hormonal birth control form, fertility awareness method. And at worst, if a woman isn't willing to do that awareness charting and all of that, then worst case scenario, the copper ring, I feel like, is a decent option. But something besides the hormones is a really good idea.
Okay, well, wonderful words to end on. Dr. Aumatma, I'd like to thank you so much for being here today. I had a great time talking with you. And like I said, I could have picked your brain for the rest of the day. So we went over time, and I appreciate you being so gracious with your time today. I'd love for you to tell the listeners about your program, where they can go to find out more, and also if anyone who's listening was inspired and wants to work with you, how they could go about doing that.
Yeah. So my website is draumatma.com, draumatma.com. I have a fertility quiz on my website. I analyze all of those quizzes myself. I recommend taking it if you're on the path of trying to conceive now, or if you think that you want to wait and you want to do something about it now in terms of preserving your fertility. I think it would be a great way to take the quiz, and generally I can look at the quiz and send you a little report of what I think might be happening on a hormonal, holistic level to consider on your path to getting pregnant. So that's my little gift for everyone. You can just go on my website, fill out the quiz, and then you'll get a report from me within a few days. And was there another question in there that I missed?
Just how, if one of our listeners wanted to work with you because they were so inspired by our conversation today, how they could go about doing that?
Oh, yes. So I think it would be the same. Fill out the quiz, and then usually the quiz generally is my way of like screening people and seeing if I can actually support them. And if I can, I'll definitely say that as the email that you get back from me. So that's the easiest way. You can also email me. It's Aumatma@gmail.com. And that's another good way to get in touch and tell me about what's happening, and then we can see about setting up a conversation.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much. Once again, it was my pleasure talking with you today.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a lot of fun talking to you as well, Lisa.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show, so head over to the show notes page and let me know what you found most helpful or most inspiring from today's show. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode at fertilityfriday.com/58. So that's the number 58. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/fertilityfridays with an S, on Twitter at Fertile Friday. And if you enjoyed what you heard today, join the community. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/community to be redirected to the Fertility Friday Fertility Awareness Facebook group. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, please look for it on iTunes and leave a 5-star review so that more people can find it. Of course, leave an honest review and let me know how I'm doing. And if you have an idea for a podcast episode or a guest suggestion, shoot me an email at info@fertilityfriday.com. I appreciate all of you for taking the time to tune into the podcast, no matter what you're doing today. So thank you again. And as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.